last time I asked you some assignment as well. Assignment in the sense that you have to look up all those scientists that I have covered in the last class. Look up in Wikipedia. Right? So have you, any of you have looked up the histories, the the biographies of those famous scientists? Have you? Any of you? Yes or no? Why not? That is an assignment. You have to take it very seriously, right? So that is what it meant for, right? That assignments are for you people to look it up and study it harder, right? So you have to do that, right? If not, this time, I mean next week, I'm going to conduct the first quiz of this course, okay, next week on the tutorial hour, right? So those scientists, I will just give you a little bit of kind of a quiz, okay? I will just ask you to say that where these guys are from. John Lightfoot. Can anyone answer where this person is from? Yeah, last time we covered his name as well, right? Do you remember, any of you remember, who is this John Lightfoot? Who is this John Lightfoot? John Lightfoot was a famous VC, right? He was a VC of Cambridge University in the 17th century. And the guy who is behind that palindromic year 4004. What is that? BC, 4004 BC. What is that? 4004 BC. Significance of that year. Any of you can remember?
According to Christianity.
Yeah. Earth. Yeah, the creation of the Earth, right? As well as its diversity. The life was created 4004 BC. That is what this John Lightfoot was saying, and he is a British person, right? So then we discussed about Georges Buffon. Who is this person? Georges Buffon. Any of you? Okay, tell his nationality. Any idea? He was a Frenchman, right? He was from France. And what did he do? What was his contribution? That he was working with garden, right? The plants. That he observed a number of fossils. And these fossils are very old. Much older than 6,000 years. That is what he said in his 17th century France. So that made a big controversy in France that time, right? Then comes Charles Lyell. Charles Lyell is a very influential person who have influenced Charles Darwin, and Charles Darwin have taken Lyell's book on principles of geology along with him in his voyage in HMS Beagle, right? Charles Lyell was an Englishman, right? And his contribution is as a principle called uniformitarianism. Remember that? That forces of nature that is happening in currently in force, for example, weathering of rocks, right? Or how this Grand Canyon is formed by weathering of the rocks in Canyon Valley, right? And that have formed right now. Whatever the forces are happening right now, the same force at the same degree were happening since time immemorial. That was his contribution, right? Charles Lyell. Then we were discussing about Lamarck, right? Where is this Lamarck from? Any idea? Say some country's name. Lamarck is from France, right? Jean-Baptiste de Lamarck, that was his full name. And he is from France again. And what was his contribution on the field of evolution?
He read the published article on by the Economist.
No. That is a different person. That is Malthus. Yeah. Economist is Malthus. Okay.
Yes.
So Lamarck is again, he was an evolutionist, and he is the first person to appreciate adaptation. Adaptation means that you are in a nature, and nature makes you adapted to whatever the habitat prevailing in that particular place. For example, islands. Okay, so finches, the birds, are adapted to whatever is available, that is a food available in each island. So that's why the beak shape of the finch is different. That is the one observation that the Darwin made in Galapagos Islands, right? So that is the contribution of Lamarck, right?
So he read the article, that article, no? He got some ideas.
Yes.
From Malthus. Lamarck get the ideas from Malthus paper, na?
Malthus is actually influenced by Darwin. Darwin read the Malthus paper, and Darwin's its own word that struggle for existence. He put that. That is actually a word coined out by Malthus in his essay, struggle for existence. Okay, so that is actually from Malthus that the Darwin have borrowed that idea of the struggle for existence. Okay, then comes, well, Malthus. Malthus is, again, it's an Englishman, a famous economist, right? Malthusian economist, right? Then Linnaeus. So Linnaeus or Linnaeus is a plant taxonomist, or animal also. He's a very famous taxonomist, or you can say he's a father of that discipline, taxonomy. Okay, and this Linnaeus, he's from where? He's from a country called Sweden. Okay, so on the north of Europe, Scandinavian country. So that is the Linnaeus. Then come another person is called James Hutton.
Essentialism.
Essentialism, no. Essentialism is a lot more older. That is by Aristotle and Plato of the Greek philosopher, right? Essentialism essentially means that the world is static and we are not doing anything. It's all static world. It's not dynamic as we see today in after the light of the evolution, right? Evolutionary theories. That is what essentialism, what you refer as. Then James Hutton, what is his contribution? James Hutton is behind a principle called gradualism. Okay, so the same thing that influenced Lyell, okay, Charles Lyell, to formulate his theory on uniformitarianism. Okay, so uniformitarianism is based upon the gradualism, that geological processes today is not like catastrophic processes, right? These are happening gradually over the course of several thousand years. For example, weathering of rocks, right, or canyon, or any of these geological processes, or drifting of continents, for example. Well, that was not known during the times of Lyell. Okay, so but anyway, James Hutton is the person behind a principle called gradualism, immensely influenced again Charles Darwin, because his theory were on the gradual evolutionary processes. That is, in contrast to another hypothesis of something called punctuated equilibria, right? So that is yet another of the hypothesis that saltations are happening. Okay, so it is gradual changes, then sudden jumping, again gradual changes, then saltations. But according to Darwin, it is only gradual changes. So that means that this punctuated equilibria is not a something contrasting the Darwin's gradual, phonetic gradualism. It is there, but again there are saltations. That is some addition to that theory, right? Some refinement of that theory. That is what this, those theories were. Is that clear to you? And then today we will see what this Darwin have done. So you can download this presentation from our course website as usual. Okay, and then you can see what all those, there are a lot of diagrams as well. You can, I request everyone to download this presentation and see that, right, those diagrams, and study more on it. And last time I also asked you to download or take copies of one chapter, Evolution of Evolutionary Biologists, in the book called Life. That is available in our library, many copies. Okay, so I have taken one copy here. So you can take copies of that copy. Okay, so otherwise you can get the book and take copies yourself, right, and give me back this copy. Is that clear? So that is going to be our textbook for this part. Okay, I suppose I'm going to complete it today itself, right? Well, Darwin, inspiration for his theories of evolution came from his voyage in HMS Beagle that he did in 19th century, beginning of 19th century. That is in 1832, right? 1831. He sailed out for a long 5 years voyage on board HMS Beagle, right? So what did he see? That he saw incredible diversity of life forms in the places wherever he went, right? He went all, he did circumnavigate the earth. So all over the earth he went. But that doesn't mean each and every corner of the earth, but he did a circumnavigation of the earth. And especially what he noted is the Chilean desert, deserts, Andes mountain, deserts of the Chile, and then Galapagos Island in in Pacific Ocean, right? These are sets of islands in Pacific Ocean, Galapagos. These are archipelago. It's not just one island. Groups of islands, like our Andaman and Nicobar Islands or Lakshadweep Islands, right? These are archipelago, right? So he also went to Brazilian rainforests, okay, and many different kinds of oceanic islands, right? The Galapagos remains the most famous place where he went, and even today you can see a lot of cruise ships from the US are going to Galapagos to trace what did Darwin see there. Okay, it's a kind of an ecotourism, the Galapagos, that still belongs to Chile. Okay, and after he returned back with an immense proof of this evolution, especially these finches, the birds, and that you can see even today, whatever the collections that Darwin made today are preserved in Museum of Natural History in London. So there is a section called Darwin there. I have seen that long back. Okay, so that section is very immaculately preserved of the samples that the Darwin have collected back in 19th century, especially the turtles and finches, right? So he spent the next 27 years explaining in detail his theory of natural selection, okay, with examples, a number of examples, right? That is what he did. Well, he made two different kinds of observations, right? That is the main observations, what he made. The first observation is something called overproduction. Okay, so overproduction. Okay, so, well, organisms are reproducing, we know, and they reproduce to such an extent that the resources become a limiting factor, right? So, everybody is capable of producing much more than what the resources can possibly support, right? That particular idea is basically of what? Whose idea was that? Malthus' idea. Yeah, so as per his influential theory on human population, right? So he was basically into the human population and that kind of economics, okay? So that is what the first observation is, that overproduction. Is that clear to you? That organisms are producing a lot, much more than what the nature can support them, okay? So that is basically of Malthus, okay? Then second observation what he made is that individual variation, that for example a species of what? Species of ladybirds, that is nothing but the spotted the insects that you can see it in the garden. These have a lot of variation. For example, finch, for what he saw that in the Galapagos Islands, right? The birds, finch, they have a lot of variations with the color as well as the beak shape. So variation is a very important factor, a very important phenomenon that he observed in his points, right? Variation. Okay, so this is basically individual variation. Individual variation in a population, right? Population. So this is a very important observation that the Charles Darwin have made. Okay, so the Darwin's major contribution or major driving force behind his conceptualization of his theory on natural selection is that he observed a lot of variation in a particular species or in a population of a particular species. You can see a lot of variation. But he don't know the reason behind this variation. Why could that be this variation? That is basically, right now we know, some of you must be knowing that it is, the reason is the genetic polymorphism, right? Genes are mutating to cause a number of variation, and these mutation processes are stochastic or random processes, that is not directional. Okay, there are a number of variants exist, and out of these variants, the most adapted variants are selected or sieved through a kind of you can think about a net. Okay, we are just sieving through the most adapted individuals. Okay, so that is what exactly the thing. So individual variation is the Darwin's own contribution. Then second observation is that the overproduction, we know, right? Then together this overproduction and individual variation leads to natural selection. Okay? So that is what his theory of natural selection is. Is that clear to you? Natural selection is, and again if you read his book, okay, so Darwin's book, then you will see that natural selection, he is explaining natural selection from what is artificial selection, VS. See, he is such a great educator as well, he is such a great teacher as well. If you know what artificial selection is, then it's much easier for you to understand what natural selection is, right? Artificial selection, as explained to you in one of my previous class, it is breeding, right? Captive breeding. That is what this artificial selection is. So we are selecting, for example, dogs. Through captive breeding, we are selecting the most or tallest dog. So we are selecting all tall dogs and we are breeding to make a particular breed, okay, pure breed comprised only of tall dogs, right? So that is what captive breeding is. That is exactly what nature is doing. Out of a number of various individuals in a population, okay, various in the sense that individuals having a lot of variations, nature is selecting what is most advantageous for the survival, and survival for reproductive success. That is what his natural selection is. For reproductive success. Okay, so that is very important that he explained all natural selection with respect to the reproductive success of a particular species in a population. Okay, so he again much before that or in parallel to it, his another main contribution is common descendant. Okay, so common descendant. So common descent means that all people or all diversity of the planet Earth is descended from one particular organism in many thousand years ago. So everything is actually related. That is a big philosophical achievement that, or drastic philosophical theory that the Darwin proposed during his time. That humans were formed from apes, right? And much more. You can trace it back the ancestry. That even he drawed on some kind of a tree. Okay, so that is what. And here he said, I think, in his notebook of 18th century that is still preserved in Natural History Museum in London. Okay, so this is the first depiction of tree of life, or TOL. Okay, so there is a big database of tree of life that some of you might have attempted in the last year's biosystematics class, right? Tree of life. So if you go to this Tree of Life website, even their emblem, okay, is this particular diagram, very famous Charles Darwin's diagram of the Tree of Life, where he depicted that this, all this extinct versus extant species. You know that difference, right? Extinct is the one which is already dead and already removed. I mean, right now you cannot see those species, right? Extant is what we can see today, and the extant is the leaves, right? Extinct are old one, right? Old members that are currently there are no thing, and these are basically the descent with modification. That is what he explained through this diagram. Common descent, okay? Descent with modification. That is what he did, right? species that diverged from a common ancestor were at first very similar. Okay, so in the near the root, or you can say the individuals right here were very similar. Then separated out. So he did A plus, this is D and A, right? A and D are a lot more divergent than, you know, C and B, or A and B are a lot more similar. That was his, actually you can see that in the slides. Okay, there is a transcript of his own handwriting written there. That is what he was explaining, okay, to explain this diagram. So that is what the diagram of that one, right? So as explained, his main contribution is that overproduction, that is by Malthus, okay, observation made by Malthus, then individual variation, that is his own creation, right, his own observation, that lead to some process called natural selection for the reproductive success, okay, for the differential reproductive success, you can say that way, differential, because some are not highly reproductively successful, some are successful. So differential in the sense that what makes it differential? Nature makes it differential. That is exactly the principle behind natural selection. Okay? Some individuals that are getting deleterious mutations, for example, deleterious mutations are mostly non-synonymous. You remember in our last class, right? These individuals have lesser reproductive success ability, okay, not individual wise, but if you look at in the population wise, okay, people getting this kind of deleterious mutations, they do not have good reproductive ability, okay, so that is why this is a differential reproductive success, and this differentiality is caused by the nature, by a mechanism called natural selection, okay, and the same natural selection, you know, and this principle of natural selection, as of today's, most of the textbook are saying this is by Darwin, Charles Darwin. But as good as Charles Darwin, there is yet another scientist called Alfred Russel Wallace. Okay, so Wallace. So Wallace is also a person behind this natural selection, the theory of natural selection, which was independently conceived by this Wallace. Okay, not just by the Charles Darwin. So these two people were in the same year, 1857 or something, that they, when the Charles Darwin published his book, that the Wallace also contributed and also published his own findings in an independent journal, that is Linnean Society. Okay, so that is what it is. So individuals with traits best suited to the local environment survives. That is the principle behind this natural selection. Individuals with traits best adapted to the nature. Traits best adapted to the nature survives. Okay. And again, that one, there is a term here, best adapted, right? To nature. Here, this adapted to the nature, again, the contribution is by Lamarck, you know. While explaining this Lamarck, I explained, right? Lamarck. Jean-Baptiste D. Lamarck, the French evolutionary biologist, right? So, adaptation is his idea. See now the Darwin, what did he do? He had collected all these ideas and summed up with his own enlightenment and with his own evidences to support his theory. That is the greatness of what Darwin had done. Okay? But you cannot say everything is done by Darwin in one particular day. No, of course not. He was influenced by all these scientists. And he made a very insightful judgment of the process of evolution. And he combined all these things together in his wonderful treatise. Okay? So, well, there are two books very important reading in this Darwin if you want to discover more about Darwin. One is, of course, we know his most famous book is The Origin of Species by Means of Natural Selection. Okay, but the book title is a lot more longer. That or right, it says like that: natural, the origin of species by means of natural selection, or the preservation of favored races in the struggle for life. Preservation of favored races in the struggle for life. Okay, so that the second part of his title is a little bit controversial, isn't it? He is referring to about races, right? Preservation of favored races. Well, in a way that's synonymy perfectly all right to explain what this process is, right? So favored races as such in terms of nature. Some races are being preserved and some races are being thrown away from the nature. But if you look at in a human point of view, races, for example, white races, favored races are preserved, and non-favored, that is, Asian or black races are thrown away. That cause a lot of racial discriminatory problems, right? So that is why most of the books of current day are avoiding that second part of the title of that book, right? Then Charles Darwin, he wrote another very interesting book on the human being, The Descent of Man, okay, and selection in relation to sex. So that is yet another of very nice book, but it is mainly concentrating on the human evolution. Okay, both of these books are available in our course website. You can download those books and read it, not simply downloading. Okay, is that clear? So Darwin's theory of evolution has been summed up by Ernst Mayr in 1982. Okay, so Ernst Mayr is, he was a very important and influential biologist. Okay. So Ernst Mayr, he was a very famous German evolutionary biologist, okay? And the same person behind a lot of contributions that Ernst Mayr have done. One of his most important contribution to the world of science is the concept of biological species that we explained last year. You remember biological species concept, where the species is defined as individuals that are capable of mating and successfully mating, in fact. If individuals cannot breed, then you cannot say that these are same species. That is what the Ernst Mayr's biological species concept is, right? So, well, he has done a lot other contributions as well, and he is one of the influential guy behind modern evolutionary synthesis. Okay, synthesis from not just by the Charles Darwin's natural selection, but also by Hugo de Vries have identified the old manuscripts written by Gregor Mendel on genetics, right? So he is combining everything together to make one theory of evolution. Well, that is not the top level theory. Well, everything is evolving. Science, there is nothing like always constant. Even theory of relativity of Einstein is being challenged these days also, right? So there is nothing constant, but it's always evolving. That is the dynamicity of the science, right? So as per the Mayr in 1982, so there are mainly 5 points of this evolution that he summed up. First is the process of evolution itself, right? Lineages of the organisms always change. That is the concept of evolution itself is the first point of Ernst Mayr's summary, okay? That characteristics of lineages of the organisms change over time. The lineages, as you can see in this one, these lineages always change, right? It's not just static like one, like this one, as per the Lamarck have written, okay? So that diagram is different from this diagram, right? That is the principle of the evolution. Okay, so evolution is a dynamic process. It's not a static, unidirectional thing. Okay. Then another important concept is a common descent. Okay. So common descent means that all individuals or species that what we see today in current day are all descended from one particular species or one particular organism. Okay? So you can trace back whatever you can see today, you can trace back to that particular organism that once lived in this world years ago, right? eons ago, you can say, there is a common descendant. That principle that made a lot of controversy again during the Darwin's period, because that again there is a straight contest to what is established in the Bible, right? There is no common descent. Everything is static and created by the God. But here it says that it's descended from, you know, one particular organism, right? And then the third one is gradualism, that everything is gradually happening. It's okay. So okay, again gradualism. The concept of gradualism he has taken after reading Lyell's book. Okay, and then Hutton and Lyell. Lyell was influenced by Hutton, original proponent of gradualism in a geological point of view. Then Lyell refined gradualism in such a way that the forces of nature had been operating since time immemorial in his treatise on uniformitarianism, right? So that is a book that the Darwin have read, and that might have influenced him to propose this gradualism. Okay, so everything is gradual. The process of evolution is gradual, and it is not one day process or 7 day in the Garden of Eden that everything have been created as per the creationist point of view. Okay, so there is a direct challenge of that one. Is it clear? Then populational change. So changes are happening on a population level. Okay, so whatever the changes, for example, well, he was not aware of the genetic changes or polymorphism. Okay, allelic frequency changes. That is what exactly the evolution is, right? The change of allelic frequency in a population. So all these changes are happening in population level. That is a very important contribution of the Darwin's theory of evolution, right? It is not on individual level. That was what the mistake of Lamarck. Lamarck thought the individual changes are responsible for long-term evolution of a species. Well, it is a population, but of course the population comprising of individual. But it is not same as the individual changes lead to the evolution. But the evolution to happen, it needs to be a population. Population is a collection of individuals living in a particular geographic area. That is what the population is. Okay. Population of human being doesn't mean the entire human being in the planet. It could be of a particular geographic area. Okay, again, geographic area is not political area, right? Politics and geography. Well, you can say African people. Okay, people who are in Africa, living in continent Africa, human beings living in continent Africa. You can group that a particular population of human being. But Kenya or Nigeria or Uganda or Zambia, these people are not population unless there is a geographic barrier. Is that clear? And changes accumulating in a population scale. Some changes, as you remember that graph, some are gone, right? Some are fixed in a population with this is frequency and this is time, right? So some changes are fixed in the population while deleterious changes are taken away from the population over the time, right? So then very most important contribution of this Darwin's theory is the natural selection itself, right? Right? So that natural selection is also independently conceived by Wallace. Is that clear? So individuals, it is caused by, that is, evolution is caused by differences in individuals' ability to survive and to reproduce. Okay, so the differential reproductive success caused by the adaptation to the nature. That is exactly the theory behind natural selection. Is that clear? So that is what when you can see that when you download this presentation, another slide I devoted for the Wallace, his contributions. Okay, so you can see that he was a 19th century naturalist, the Wallace, Alfred Russel Wallace. Okay, so he is considered as a father of a discipline called biogeography. Okay, so biogeography examines the distribution patterns of a species in a geographic level, right? So, for example, in a continent or in islands, okay? So, or two areas separated by a river, for example, or aquatic species in a particular lake. These are all covered under the discipline of biogeography. Okay, so that is the major contribution of this Wallace in this discipline, is that he went to Amazonian delta. Okay, the delta comprising of the Amazon, that is a rainforests, right? Habitat is rainforest. So he went to the Amazonian delta and he studied on a number of species, distribution of these species that is peculiar to that particular area. Again, Amazonian delta. Well, that itself is not just one biogeographic zone. There are there are a number of small biogeographic zones inside the Amazonian delta as well. And he also worked on Malay archipelago. He went all the way to Malaysia to see the kinds of distribution of animals, especially birds in Malayan archipelago. Okay, so it's an archipelago comprising of a number of thousands of islands, right? I think this is the biggest archipelago in the world, Malaysian or Malayan archipelago. Okay, so what he observed is that there is actually a line between west and east Malaysia. Okay, that line is now what we refer as Wallace Line. Okay, because of Wallace found it. That it's a imaginary line. Okay, something like equator. It's an imaginary line, right? That doesn't exist. That on the left side of it, that is basically on the west of it, that line, species are a lot more similar to what you can see that in the East Asia. Okay, and on the right side of it, that is on the east of it, species are a lot more similar to the Australian or Eurasian or East Asian species in morphology. Okay, that is what he observed it. Well, he is right now he is regarded to be the father of the biogeography for his number of contributions on it, right? So, yeah, well, he presented his ideas in Linnean Society of London meeting, and Darwin, in his subsequent editions of his book, he also included, given the credit of discovering natural selection to Wallace as well. So that shows an excellent diplomacy of the scientific publications. Okay, so otherwise, like that is back in 19th century, right? Now you can see a lot of struggles, right? To who is more credited to have one particular publication if published, right? So the diplomacy is actually lacking on these modern days. But if you compare with that 19th century, they are a lot more diplomatic in that sense. Okay? So, but today it is all natural selection is all given to Darwin. The credit, most of the credit goes to the Darwin, and Wallace is a little bit forgotten figure in the theory of evolution. One reason for that is that Wallace theory is all on conceptual basis only on concept, and this is only a theory for Wallace. But for the Charles Darwin, he amassed a battery of evidences, a number of evidences that he collected from his voyage across the world. Right? So he could able to give a proof for his theory, empirical proof for his theory, with his number of examples that he collected from the voyages. Is that clear? So, well, mainly there are two philosophical issues of the revelations of Charles Darwin. One is that staticity versus dynamicity. So till now, that essentialism of Aristotle, as well as a number of creationist ideologies, were saying that the world is static, okay, and it is created by God in 7 days or so. Okay, but as per the theories of Charles Darwin, it is dynamic, highly dynamic, and it's changing even now. And people found it very hard to accept these views of the Charles Darwin during those days. Okay, so another one is about purpose and function, right? So till Darwin, everything, all questions like why so. So why there is sun and why there are so many stars we can see, people used to say there is a purpose behind it. Okay, so there is a purpose behind everything. Purpose of life, for example, we normally say, right? What is the purpose of life? So if you say this purpose in English, that gives some kind of a force, an external force acting on it. We are not deciding. Purpose of life means if we if we think about what is the purpose, so that means there is actually a kind of life has an aim. Okay, so that we are actually going towards that aim, predetermined aim. So that is what the purpose means here. Okay, so we are all nothing but we are all a member of that determination or creation that is contributed by the world, the creator, or the God, right? So that is what the purpose is. But after the Darwin, what Darwin found is that it is not just purpose, but it's actually a function, right? Function of something. So for example, hydrogen bomb. It is not, what is the purpose of hydrogen bomb? It is a function of hydrogen bomb, right? So mostly the scientists after the Darwin started contemplating on the purposes, not just purposes of the life, but functions of various life phenomena. Is that clear? So that is what? For example, pink color of a bird. We are not asking what is the purpose of that pink color. Well, pink color, it is, if you say what is the purpose of it, that means that pink color is someone have colored it pink for a particular goal to achieve. There is no goal to achieve to have that flower or a bird pink, but there is a function for it also. That is to survive it, right, in the habitat. Okay, so that is what this debate on that one. Then there is something about particulate inheritance, right? That is discovered by Gregor Mendel.